You might be asking yourself, well, where's Tigersharks? The fact is that no fan cares enough about Tigersharks to cover the theme song. So,
20 seconds anyway.
right.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah,
It's
exactly.
pretty short, yeah. All right, so I feel like I got to make a confession to you guys. So when we started our YouTube channel 4 years ago, the very first video that we ever did was about Thundercats. And I don't know if anybody in here has seen it. If you have, then I'm sure you kind of know where I'm about to go with this. But I just kind of wanted to let you know that after the panel, if you go and look it up and you want to know a little bit more about it, I just want you to know that this guy really hates the Thundercats. And so like we actually met. I think they're gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. No, so we have a really good friend who is a huge fan of the Thundercats, and he always, like, when we met at a Firefly meetup group, and he was like, oh, Michael, do the Thundercats thing, and he thought it was hilarious, and so he would request it at every party and every gathering, and Michael would do it, and everybody would laugh. So we thought that'd be perfect to start this YouTube channel with, because like everybody thinks it's hilarious. So we're completely stupid and naive, right? And we put it on YouTube, and like people, if you want to read the meanest comments of anything online, just go to that video and just like start reading about, like, they're so angry and they take it very personally. But I mean, he really doesn't like the show that much. But I mean, I want to point out that I actually had never seen the show as a kid. But I actually love Rankin Bass, so I watched a lot of this show, and I got to tell you, I actually really like Thundercats. So if you're looking for your spokesperson up here, I'm your girl. Okay,
I'm not here to bash the Thundercats.
No,
today.
we're not going to be bashing the Thundercats.
I've promised to behave myself. We're going to give you a complete history of the show.
But we just wanted you to know. So like when you go afterwards and you look it up, and you're like, wow, this guy is like, just be prepared. So, but today is all about the awesomeness of both of these shows and some of the weird quirks, but all with like love for these things. So if you love these shows, then you're in the right place. So just to go ahead and get started, everybody probably remembers Rankin Bass and their creation of a lot of holiday specials, and my favorite movie of all time, The Last Unicorn. Which also has an amazing folksy soundtrack by America, which is just like awesome. So I really love Rankin Bass, and they have such an amazing, beautiful animation style that it really influences everything they do with both of these shows that we're talking about today. The Thundercats, a lot of people talk about Rankin Bass creating the Thundercats, but actually this man, Ted Wolfe, came up with these ideas. This guy was a World War II veteran, and he sat around with his daughter one night, and they came up with these ideas of these cat people. There really weren't a lot of stories that they had come up with about them. They just kind of designed what they looked like and came up with a few of the names. And so this guy was kind of connected. He was an inventor, and he dealt a lot in the toy industry. So he pitched it to Rankin Bass, or a friend of his did. And so Jules Bass and Leonard Starr is who they hired initially, and he wrote the show's Bible, which is sort of tells future writers sort of the outline of what to do with the characters and the universe and that sort of thing. So these guys, Leonard Starr in particular, is really instrumental in creating the mythology of the Thundercats. So it's worth mentioning that, just so you guys know. And if you haven't seen any of our other panels where we talk about this, just, if you have, bear with me. But in 1983, Ronald Reagan had deregulated children's television. And so what happened in the place of all that legislation that had been there in the 70s was parents groups stepped in, and they were like, look, you guys are marketing to our kids. You're putting toy commercials right in there during the cartoons that you're showing. And so we're really going to need you to like step back on some of these other things. You're going to have to work with us because these are our kids.
So what happened was Rankin Bass stepped in, and Rankin Bass said, okay, we respect what the Action for Children's Television wants to do. We respect their requests. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a consultant, like a child psychologist or something like that, who's going to look over all of the scripts for Thundercats before they're made and give us notes to make sure that the messages that we're imparting in Thundercats are appropriate for children.
Have you guys heard about, have you ever noticed at the end that they actually give credit to, yeah? Okay, well, so this wasn't actually just the Thundercats. This was actually, psychological consultants were used in a lot of shows, including G.I. Joe and He-Man. And so you guys remember all the morals at the end of the shows and things like that. Well, so Thundercats kind of wanted to do something different. They actually did a lot of things different. So instead of putting just a little moral at the end, like He-Man and some other shows did, they decided that they were going to work it into the show itself. Sort of like how they now try to work advertising and product placement directly into the shows we're watching, so you kind of aren't aware of it.
Right, so rather than Spirit jumping out of the woods to put a kid out in a flaming sleeping bag at the end, it was more like...
It would be in the...
It would be like Lion-O putting Snarf's sleeping bag out in the middle of the show and then saying, Snarf, you shouldn't be that close to the fire. Like, it's just that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. So it's just sort of interesting to know that, like, they were basically taking that information that they were like, all right, parents groups, we've run this by a psychologist, so, like, we can show that this show has, like, moral values and good stuff that you want your kids to do. But not only that, but Rankin Bass took it a step even further. They actually went to teachers groups, and they had this, this is actually a newsletter from within the company, and they were designing study guides to give to teachers and parents. And they basically were like, here, like, watch the show after school today, little Johnny, and then come back tomorrow and we're gonna have a lesson plan about what did Lion-O learn during the episode, and we're all gonna talk about it. It's super ingenious because you get the parents and the teachers on board and basically force the kid to watch the show. Not only did they have that marketing strategy, but you guys may remember this.
Burger King announces Thundercats meal packs. There's 4 of them in all for you to collect and trade. And every week there's an amazing new Thundercats trade with a plain royal burger, golden fries, and an ice cold drink. It's a delicious adventure.
All right, I want you guys to check out what I got up here. It glows in the dark, too. So a little later, I'm going to have a little challenge, and somebody's going to win this. All right. Because we wanted to really be sure to give you guys, you know, a good panel on the show, we actually polled all of our fans online, and
that's not 50, that's about 8,000 people on Facebook. So
100 people actually wrote in, and they wrote, I said, okay, Thundercats fans, I need your help. Like, what are your favorite things about the show? And I want to see if anybody can guess what came in as number 1 favorite thing about the show. Like, I got 100 responses, and this won by a landslide. Any Panthro? Okay. Snarf. It doesn't have to just be a character. It can be anything about the show.
Tygra at the first episode.
Okay. That actually was an answer. I know you're not surprised. Actually, it's the music. Like, people love that intro song, and you guys were all singing it, so, I mean, obviously it's very catchy. But the next thing that they really loved was the animation and the quality and the character designs and stuff like that. So, I mean, you can really see in this intro that sort of kind of an anime style, and it's very dynamic, and if you watch the scenes here, like, they pull back and they zoom in. Like, this Chitara is just amazing. All the different angles that they get her from, it's just awesome.
Yeah, and even though the intros were of a higher quality generally in the 80s than, say, the content inside the show, Rankin Bass actually did have superior animation within the show as well. It was a step above many other shows. I think the only animation house that could really compete with it was Sunbow with the G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Yeah, and so these characters are obviously based off of cats. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a side-by-side. In terms of the design, you can see kind of the lines on Chitara's face are kind of similar to the lines on the cheetah's face. So I think they did a really good job of sort of capturing the feeling of the different kinds of big cats. But one thing that they kind of didn't get exactly right, and I'm a huge cat person, so like, and even as a kid, like I read my zoo books religiously, okay? Big cats have round pupils, and house cats have slit eyes. And so the Thundercats have the slit eyes like house cats, so they're like giant house cats, kind of. I think that's awesome, okay? Like, I love my cats, but I just sort of think of it like, oh, you could just like, yeah, they're like domesticated.
Now, this is another factor that folks mentioned about the show, is that they really loved Lion-O, and that he doesn't know how to be a hero at first, and he has to learn how to be a leader and to be a soldier and to be a hero. And in some episodes, he might not completely succeed, and they felt like it raised the stakes of the show. He's a young kid in an adult body. He's like Tom Hanks in Big. But, you know, why is that the case? Well, that's one of the big question marks about Thundercats that's never really been agreed upon. There's a sequence in the very first episode where they have to all get in these hibernation pods in order to make a long journey through space. Now, Jaga does say, Jaga's their mentor, their Obi-Wan character, and he does say, before they get into the pods, he says, some aging may occur. You know, objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear. But when they crash land on Third Earth, the only person who has aged at all is Lion-O. I don't know if everybody else got a few swigs from the Fountain of Youth before they got in or anything like that, but Lion-O's the only one that ages, and it's never really explained in either the British version, yes?
Actually, it is. His pod was defective.
So that's the thing, is like, this is a long-standing thing that we've actually scoured the show.
Right.
And it doesn't actually say it. However, your brain, it's like the most obvious thing that had to be the pod malfunction, because what else could it be? Your brain just kind of like fills that in. So like, I didn't even catch it when we were watching it. Michael was like, I don't think they said that. So we literally watched it like 3 or 4 times to make sure.
We got our British friends online who follow us. They sent us the British videotape clips that are the extended cut. They don't explain it either. So we had this war going on online. I felt bad.
You almost wonder if it was originally in the script and then somehow with editing or something it got cut out, and like maybe they intended to say it, but it's like, well, it's obvious that's what happened. So it's not like it's a really big deal, but
there is actually a name for this phenomenon, and it's called the Mandela Effect. Back when Mandela passed away, there were many people who claimed, like, vehemently, they were like, he died in the 80s. He died in the 80s in prison. And they were like, I remember it. I remember the footage. There were people saying it. And it actually spills over into fandom as well. How many people here in this audience have a friend who swears up and down that they saw Star Wars with the Biggs scenes in it in the beginning, and they saw it in the theater, right? It's totally not true. You know it's not, but you have to look at your friend and go, all right, yeah, I've heard this before. You swear you saw it. They were never included in the movie. That's part of this whole collective false memory.
The interesting thing about this whole Mandela Effect, if you Google it after the panel, this was actually something that was kind of like discovered. The Mandela Effect came up at DragonCon.
It was created here.
Like, it was during a panel, somebody was discussing, I don't know why, but Nelson Mandela came up in the conversation, and that's where it all started. And so if you look it up, you'll see, I think it's someone who's now speaking on the alternate history track or something like that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, just a little, the more you know. Okay. That's right. So another thing that people loved about the show was Tygra. He's the brains of the operation, and he's an architect, and he can turn invisible, and that's super handy, I would imagine. Like, all of the ninjas who were sitting over there are invisible. So, but another thing, going back to my whole, like, okay, this is how big cats really are. Does anyone remember what Tygra is afraid of?
Fire.
Was it?
Fire.
He is afraid of fire, but he's also afraid of water. Now, what's funny about that is that of all the big cats, tigers love swimming the most of all the cats. Like, you can look at them and they just like get in the water and play. So I just think that's funny, and I don't know if that was just they didn't know that, or if it was kind of like a sort of a twist. Like, but either way, I think that's kind of interesting.
Now, this is my favorite Thundercat. Panthro. I even said in my video that the whole show should have been about him. I thought he was awesome. And
Yeah, I agree.
he's the tough guy. He's the mechanic. He drives and built the Thunder Tank, so he's Q and James Bond all in one. He's got the nunchucks, which is the ultimate 80s ninja weapon. And if you have any doubt in your mind that Panthro isn't the coolest Thundercat
And the toughest.
I'd like to point you to a clip from the first season.
You'll have to best each one of them in turn to get to the next point.
They'll try to stop me? My friends?
It's their sworn duty.
I see. All right then. Who's the first?
Panthro.
Panthro.
Don't even act like you wouldn't react the same way.
Panthro is the toughest, baddest Thundercat there is, and he has carried his reputation from Thundera to Third Earth. And Lion-O, as spoiled and arrogant as he can be sometimes, even he's like, I don't want anything to do with that.
All right. So now to go to our friend's statement over here. He's not wrong at all. A lot of the guys who responded actually pointed out to me that they were fans of Chitara. They didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I don't really want to know about that, but I think she's pretty awesome too. She's really fast, obviously. She's a cheetah, so that makes a lot of sense. And she's also got a sixth sense, which I guess is like woman's intuition. And I don't really have a problem with that, like being like sexist or whatever. I just think it's kind of cool that she's got that. It probably could have even eventually become a little bit more than it was. Like they could have worked with that plot device. I think that's pretty cool. The Wily kittens.
Oh, I sense mixed feelings in the room. It's
Yeah,
like jar and jar.
I don't.
Separate.
Stop it! You said you were going to be
No,
good.
I'm not saying that. I don't think that. It was I was reading
See,
the room.
I can't tell if you guys were being like, "Aw," or if you were being like, "Oh." Okay. All right.
Right. They are like they're like kid ninjas. They have a variety of chemical compounds on their belts, and they can do all kinds of crazy, acrobatics and stuff like that. Sometimes
And they had hoverboards, which is kind of
they
cool.
have
in 80s.
hoverboards, which is pretty sweet. So they could take on Griff if they wanted to.
Wait for it. Okay.
We can't get out of this without talking about Star.
I think it's funny that like the Wily kittens, you guys were all kind of like, "Ugh," but like Snarf, some of you were like, "Ugh," and some of you were like, "Oh, Snarf." So like, who loves Snarf? Who thinks he's awesome? It's like half and half. That's really interesting.
Right. Wow.
So here's what I think is cool. Here's what I think. He's what?
He's not Orko.
Oh, well, that's true. You're right about that. He's not Orko. I think it's cool that Snarf can communicate with other animals, like in the way that he can. I think that's a cool idea. I mean, I grant you that his voice is kind of annoying. Obviously, he was there for the little kids who were watching the show and kind of be the comic relief and stuff like that, because you're talking about a show which, and I'm going to talk about this more a little later, but this show really stands out as one of the few cartoon shows for kids that had a meta plot. Like, these characters evolved over the series, and aside from like maybe Voltron and Robotech, I can't really think of a lot of other shows that really developed out their characters and that you kind of wanted to watch, like just to see, oh, I'm going to learn more about Tygra today. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Yes.
All the main characters are obviously based on some type of animal. Was it ever explained what Snarf was based on?
Yes, the Jackalope.
Actually, I think it was Leonard Starr had written a description of him that he was like sort of part, I don't know if he said dragon, I'd have to look it up. I actually read a big part of the book called Hear the Roar. If you're a big Thundercats fan, it's out of print, but it's a great book. It's got a ton of great information about the production of the show. And he talked about how he basically just sort of said he's half this and half that and maybe a little bit of this in there. And so they gave it to the animators over in Japan, and that's what they created. All right, Mumra. I know you guys love him. A lot of people said they love him. He was a sorcerer and a demon priest, and he is a native from Third Earth. And so he's just kind of really awesome in his ability to transform from something that's already really scary to something that's just really big and scary. So, but what I love about him, and you sort of start seeing this in the show, is he really loves his dog. Like, he loves his dog, but I guess he's just not really a cat person. You know,
Yeah.
like he really does. But so there's a lot of Egyptian themes in here, and I think it came from the cat people idea. And so you see a lot of things like the pyramids, and then there's pharaohs, and even the cat's lair is very sphinxy. And then they have these canopic jars, which are sort of the evil spirits, the ancient spirits that sort of control Mumra. But what's funny is, and you can talk about the whole...
Yeah, it's that if Mumra was truly from Egyptian origin, then he would see the Thundercats as gods. So my speculation is that he was the one dissenter back in ancient Egypt who hated the cats, and so that's why he was entombed. And then when the cats show up on his planet, he wants to take them apart. But what's interesting is that the Egyptians worshiped the cats because the cats got rid of the rats, because the rats ate the grain. But Mumra teams up with a rat later on in the series, so clearly he has it out for cats. He is not your typical Egyptian pharaoh wizard guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so this show, if you haven't seen it in a while, the opening episode, it's one of the only series I've ever seen where the entire cast is buck naked in the first episode. And what's creepy about it is that Jaga, who's their mentor, is the only one wearing clothes, and he tells them, well, we're about to go off planet into another galaxy or another solar system, and out there, you're going to need these clothes to protect yourself. And it's like, so you were living on a planet where you'd convinced everybody to walk around naked in front of you, and you're the only clothed guy.
So sometimes on the show...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say sometimes on... Oh, yeah, they do have belts, right, which kind of...
Why, we don't know. Like,
That's like... That's like... Yeah, but that's like Donald wearing a shirt and no pants. It'd be better without the shirt.
it calls the attention to the nudity.
Right. There's another thing on this show that's a little unique, and that's the line deliveries. They had very talented voice actors who did numbers of, countless voices on multiple shows. But the one thing that they did on this show, the vocal direction is a little odd.
Are you from this third Earth? No, I am from this that was destroyed. Called Thundera.
Thundera! It's like, why did they direct her to do that? Because she's a very talented voice actress. So some of the intonations on this show are things that you really can't walk away with.
And it's just every once in a while. Like,
Yeah.
you're watching it and you're like, okay, and then it's like jarring. It's weird.
Right.
Thunder. Okay. So there's this whole idea of the Thundercats. Are they the heroes or are they an invading force? Because technically, Mumra was there first, and I know he's evil and stuff like that, but it's kind of like, did anybody watch the Vehicle Voltron?
Yeah.
So, the Drools were already there, and then the Vehicle Voltron folks come in, and so they're like the invader, but like you kind of are on their side. It's weird. So the Thundercats are kind of like that. Mm-hmm. This is Third Earth, okay? And they have this really cool map of Third Earth, and they don't ever call it Earth. So you don't ever really know explicitly, is this supposed to be our Earth? Or is it like something like Earth, or what's the deal? But I'm pretty sure it's Earth, and now that I've read the book, I know that it was originally supposed to be Earth after a couple of nuclear wars. So this is like current Earth, and then another, Earth.
But in the first episode, doesn't Mumra have a line, I've been here since this was first Earth?
Yeah.
Yes, but it doesn't say that first Earth is our Earth. It's just kind of, again, your
are we
brain fills that in, but it's unclear.
right? It's like, are we Middle Earth or Left Earth or Right Earth? We don't really know.
So they don't ever talk about the nuclear war thing, and the reason why is that Rankin Bass felt like that was like Leonard Starr wrote that it was going to be a nuclear holocaust type of thing, like Thundar, but they felt like it was just too like hardcore for kids to deal with something like that. So
Is this map online?
yeah,
Yes, you can get it online.
yep. And so we know that this is Earth, though, even without all of that, because we've got Merlin and Excalibur and human beings and Egyptian and gold mirrors. I mean, we've got everything that
Samurais.
our Earth has. So we know that this is our Earth.
Ninja.
Yeah,
Ninja.
ninja. Right.
Yeah, the Sword of Omens starts out with a few basic rules in the show, but then it quickly becomes this Deus Ex Machina device that solves all the problems in the show. It turned into a pole vault, so Lion-O could pole vault over things. It became something that could cure the Thundercats of illnesses. He could fly on it. He could control the weather with it. The logo of the Thundercats that emitted from it would eventually be attacking the bad guys in some of the final episodes of the show. It was really amazing. But this is not unique to Thundercats. This is not a dig on Thundercats. You know, as Superman progressed, they kept adding powers to him. The writers kept adding more and more amazing things he could do. And in Dungeons and Dragons, Hank's laser bow, his energy bow, started to be this also turnkey device that could save the heroes from anything.
Speaking of Superman, just really quickly, there's a lot of similarities. So they both had a destroyed homeworld, and they're both orphaned heroes of a new planet, and they both have rocks from their original homeworld that can kill them or ruin their powers. So Thundranium, anybody remember Thundranium?
Thundranium and Kryptonite.
Obviously, there's a lot of similarities with Star Wars as well, with the sword and
Yeah, the ghostly Jaga giving
Ghostly
him advice.
Jaga and Robert
Robo-
Burbles.
Yeah. So the Thundercats toys came out in 1985 from LJN, and they were very colorful. They looked great on display. Their scaling was a little bit of an issue. Like Lion-O is the same size as Mumra, and both those characters tower over the other figures in the line. Even though Tygra is supposed to be about the same height as Lion-O. Panthro's in this weird kind of constipated position. I'm not really sure what that's all about. But they were very robust toys. Like they were very difficult to break, which is good for a kid.
I just want to point out that this is one of the few properties where the original idea was the cartoon, and then came the toy line, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting if you think about it from that perspective.
Right.